to the incorporation of the city. And we quickly went from one station to two stations. 1961 is our first real station. 1964 was our second station. And you've probably heard me talk to this group and throughout the community about our desires in wanting to really modernize our response capabilities. And what you're seeing right here, these two blobs, this is how fast we can get to anywhere in the city within 4 minutes, or how the locations that we can get to within 4 minutes from our two fire stations that we've had since 1964. We haven't added any additional. And so you've heard me talk quite a bit about these gaps that exist. We have one down to the south, and then we have one up to the north. And we're trying to address those right now. And we're trying to address those through a temporary fire station and eventually a permanent fire station down in the south. And then also then we need to go on to the next phase, which is addressing the fire station up to the north. We have a lot of fires. This is what keeps me up at night and my chief officers up at night, and likely many of our elected officials and my boss, the city manager, is we have a lot of fire incidents in this city. And a lot of them happen to be along the San Diego River corridor. You know, in addition, we have a lot of just incidents in general. And what these hot spots are the frequency of how often we go to certain areas. And you can see this one hot spot over here, Santee Trolley Square, right? It obviously makes sense if you look down a little bit lower. That would be around the Costco area. And so we know that typically our calls are where our population is, and we have a pretty big surge in population throughout business hours in this community. And then when you kind of put the two of those over each other, you can see between our fires and where our calls are, we have a lot of calls that happen right in the center of town, and that's why we've really been prioritizing doing something to that south area and putting a new temporary fire station, again, temporary fire station, so we could really have better response times to this hot spot area in our community. And eventually we want to get here. This is our focus. This is what one of our primary things that we focus on, but it's not the only thing. This takes a lot of capacity from the entire city, is how do we get from those two blobs to these four blobs, which for us just means that we're getting to your homes much faster, we're getting to your businesses much faster, we're protecting this community much better. As my brothers and sisters in the law enforcement will tell you, time is everything. How quickly we could respond to an incident means something. And it's usually a more positive impact. We can get there quicker. You know, some of the things that we do, it's obviously implied in the name. We go to fires, whether it's structure fires or vegetation fires, which I showed you some pictures of all those vegetation fires, commercial fires, airplane crashes, vehicle accidents. And that only represents really a small portion, though. The fire-related portion is really, really a small amount of what we do. As you can see, the big blue portion of the pie is EMS-related calls. That's 86%. But in addition to fire and EMS and rescue, we do a lot of planning. We do a lot of planning based upon scenarios that we hope will never happen. And we ask for outside consultants to come in and give us their opinions. We put our own hazard mitigation plan, or we develop our own hazard mitigation plan that needs to be updated every 3 to 5 years. We have our emergency operations plan that I'm going to allow Chief Moiner to talk through. And we collaborate with the County of San Diego. And again, these are 4 pretty robust documents that we work through on almost like an annual cycle, because they're all kind of staggered. We don't do them all at the same time. But what this involves is planning for large-scale events, things that we hope will never happen to our community, but we still have to put a ton of work into planning for how are we going to mitigate those, which means how are we going to minimize their impact, how are we going to respond to them, and how are we going to recover from them. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Battalion Chief Kyle Moiner to talk about emergency management and our emergency operations plan.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Chief mentioned, my name is Kyle Moiner. I'm Battalion Chief with the City of Santee. I'm assigned to A Division, but I have been taking on a larger role in emergency management along with Captain Gerhardt and Chief Machishita. and we're going to shift gears just a little bit and talk about emergency management. I won't give a too long of a history lesson on it, but I do want to talk about how appreciative we are to speak to this group in particular and other community stakeholder groups about what we can do in Santee to be more prepared, to be better. Does everyone know, is everyone aware that September is National Preparedness Month? Anyone aware of that? We have a proclamation for that. Fortunately for us, because we're doing these meetings, the theme for this month or this year's National Preparedness Month is start a conversation, which is what we're hoping to do here. So I'm going to talk, give maybe some background on some stuff, but we're really hoping to get feedback. We're going to take some notes and hopefully be a little bit more interactive and just kind of see what this group feels and is able to provide us feedback with what we can do better. So the shape of emergency management, it really took hold to how it is today back in March of 2011. We had we had a Presidential Policy Directive 8, PPD 8. President Obama says that we need to build a more resilient and a more secure nation. And it's going to take not just the government, but everyone, individuals, private sector, public sector, everyone. So from that, the president says, we're going to come up with a national preparedness goal. So they produced this document, National Preparedness Goal. It has core capabilities of how we're going to be more prepared, be more resilient, and have a more secure nation. So this framework is essentially created. And in that framework, there's 4 phases of emergency management that we're going to talk about: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So we try to simplify those. Mitigation for us is really, it's an investment. How do we lessen the impact of these things? For us that are evident here, we do brush clearing. In other jurisdictions, they don't build in floodplains or they prepare their buildings a certain way. They invest in their future knowing that these hazards do exist and they try to mitigate them. They want to lessen the impact. They'll oftentimes use a cost-benefit analysis. If we put money into this, how much money are we going to save in return when these events happen? And we are very aggressive with mitigation in our city. As Chief kind of mentioned, I'm a printer out guy. I print out everything. It's easy to read. Captain Gerhardt actually had a huge role in this document. He's the go-to guy for hazard mitigation. But this is our document adopted in 2023, and it talks about how we can mitigate the hazards in our community. How do we invest? And we've done fantastic things. We have a FEMA grant, over $7 million coming to the city. That's going to help clear some brush. A huge win for the city and for Chief Machida for putting that together. Preparedness for us is let's get ready. Let's plan, organize, let's buy equipment, let's train, let's build go bags. Operations, that's kind of for us and our law enforcement folks. It's go time. We're saving lives, we're saving property, and we're protecting the environment. And then lastly is the recovery, which is the efforts to return to our pre-event. All these phases overlap. They could, one could start when the other one is finishing up, vice versa. They could start simultaneously. But essentially that is kind of the overview of emergency management. So specifically for the emergency operations plan that we have, I printed that one out too. 60-page document. It's essentially a comprehensive approach to emergency management for the city of Santee. So it was adopted in 2020. Every 4 years, we will renew it and update it, provide updates. And there's already things that we need to update it based upon our 2023 hazard mitigation plan. As part of that update, we are required and we want to get community feedback, stakeholder feedback. We want to know what we can improve, what we're missing. We want to take a whole community approach. It's everyone's responsibility to provide input so that we can better protect Santee. So within that document in our emergency operations plan, there's a lot of standardization that came from the framework. We have ICS, which is Incident Command System. That's how we can work with our law enforcement personnel on incidents. We can talk the same language. We can have other mutual aid agencies come in and give us assistance. We have our emergency operations center. It's all standardized. And we try to do that to make things more efficient, more clear, more concise. We also want to make sure that we communicate the same. So we do have ways that we communicate. They're listed in the operations plan. Is this group familiar with ways that we can communicate in emergency? Has anyone heard of 211? You heard of that? What about WIA? Everyone familiar with WIA? Wireless emergency alerts. Send a text message to anyone in an area, receive a message about what's going on. alertsandiego.org. We're trying to do better about getting this information out through social media and through campaigns. We had a new change in how we communicate our evacuation and repopulation. Has anyone ever heard of Genesis? Genesis Protect, hopefully. That's the system that we're now using to push out if we need to do evacuation warnings or evacuation orders. So we're trying to be more consistent with how we communicate. So we have a lot of standardization, a lot of consistency with communication.
Hey, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Before you move on, can you explain Genesis just a touch more? Because that is probably one of the most important programs that we've gotten in a long time, and how it can facilitate more precisely where people are evacuated from, just because it's so important.
Absolutely. So the old system that was in place, it was a grid system that was essentially established by San Diego Gas and Electric. They had built these grids. And when we needed to make an evacuation, we would look ahead at the area we wanted to evacuate. We'd mark off this grid and we'd look ahead in 2-hour increments. Okay, so we want to evacuate this grid now, and then think ahead, give a warning for 2 hours up ahead. We would call into dispatch. We would say what we wanted evacuated, and then we would try to push out reverse 911, wireless emergency alerts. Law enforcement would go door to door, try to blast. We'd try to notify people, but there was many steps in place that had to happen before we could get that message to the end user, which is the person that needs to be evacuated. So Genesis came in and they redrew the grids. We no longer use a grid system. We use zones. They make a lot more sense to sheriff and fire and other emergency managers. We want to evacuate north of this street and east of this geographical mark. It just made a lot more sense to us to create these zones. And we can do it from a handheld device, from an iPad, a tablet, a phone even. The fire department and law enforcement and other dispatch, they have the ability to put that in, and it immediately updates anyone that has downloaded the Genesis Protect app or the Genesis Evac app. The Protect is on the fire side, and they will get an immediate notification. So it eliminates all these loopholes, and it's one-stop shop for us to say, this is what we want, this is where we want you folks to go to be safe, and you receive that information, and then you can go. You don't have to wait. So it removed all of this additional steps and processes that they had to go through to get approved through the county for us to notify folks.
Thank you.
Hopefully that cleared it up a little bit. So emergency operations plan, we're in our fire department uniforms today, but it is not just a fire department thing. Every city department is involved in our emergency operations plan: finance, human resources, planning, building, engineering, law enforcement, city clerks involved, city councils involved, city managers involved, as well as all of our supporting agencies. There are a lot of supporting agencies that we rely on. As Chief had kind of mentioned, we rely on the county, we rely on the state, we rely on FEMA, Red Cross, CERT, non-governmental organizations, the private sector. They're all a part of this plan because it's specific to Santee. So that's where we're going to shift now. We talk about the generalization, the framework, but this is specific to Santee. The plan, the framework, is scalable to make sure that the individual jurisdiction has the ability to craft their plan based upon the needs of the community. We base that upon what our threats, hazards, and vulnerabilities are in Santee. So I want to just take a minute and just have an open discussion about what kind of threats and hazards does Santee face? Well, we're in fire department uniforms, so hopefully that one's pretty obvious, but fire. But what else? What else can you think of? Interact with me a little bit here. Mr. Mayor, what do you got?
I'd say Your biggest issue is emergency medical services.
All right, EMS, yeah, absolutely. What else? Mass shootings, absolutely. What else?
How about rock slides?
Rock slides.
Slides.
How about a dam failure?
Dam failure.
San Vicente right up there. Hazardous materials release. We got Padre Dam up the street.
How about flooding?
Flooding, absolutely, yeah. So we had in our EOP, we had identified 5 of the top hazards, and it's already changed based upon our hazard mitigation. So we mentioned public health, extreme weather. We have Gillespie Field, just to the south of us, aircraft incidences, issues with our infrastructure and how we operate here. So there are threats that are very specific to Santee. So our plan should be tailored to those threats, hazards, and vulnerabilities. So I want to build upon the whole community inclusive approach. The community makes Santee unique. It's the folks in this room and the folks that we represent. And it's really important that we work together so that we can mitigate, prepare, respond to, and recover to those incidents that are threatening our community. The location of our schools, the location of where we build our infrastructure, with mobile home parks, there's groups with access and functional needs. It's all very important for us to get that feedback from the community, from groups like this, so that we can adopt that into our EOP and make sure that we're not missing the mark. And as I mentioned, we already have identified different hazards that we need to put into our EOP that weren't in there 4 years ago. So our ultimate goal here, it's really to build community resilience. And what does that mean? So resiliency is the ability to adapt to changing conditions, absorb an impact, and more quickly return to a pre-event status. So the better we know our community, the better we can understand our threats, vulnerabilities, and hazards, and the better we can mitigate, prepare for, respond to, and recover from emergencies. And ultimately, this translates into a more resilient community. So we're happy to answer any questions you might have about our EOP, our hazards, and what we're trying to do. If there's no discussion here, we do have a survey that we put together that will take that information in. I have a QR code here, or we have a QR code that we would love it if you would scan that and take a look at it and ask some questions, and we'll receive that information and we'll integrate it into our EOP and update our documents. Are there any questions I can answer right now?
Steve?
Can you speak a little more about the consistency of communication? You mentioned several services. Some of them I was not familiar with. Can you speak to which ones are sort of resident consumer directed resources? Like is Genesis Protect, that app, is that for people like me who live in the area?
Absolutely, yeah. We hope that everyone is aware that Genesis Protect is on the fire department, the sheriff, and the dispatch side. They're the ones that are inputting the information, and Genesis EVAC is the app that you need for being able to receive that information and know that you need to evacuate.
So
we can send that.
The EVAC one is the one that residents should be more interested in?
Yeah, what I could do is we do have a flyer that we can send. Maybe I can send it to our city clerk, and he could send out to this group, and we'll make another social media push to make sure people are aware of that.
That's great. Thank you.
Mark?
As I'm hearing this and checking in with my past experiences with this kind of planning, et cetera, and so much of what's gone in around the world has brought to light that sometimes we're on our own. As best laid plans and everything, do the plans include contingencies or information services to come back out into the community to say, sometimes you're going to be on your own for a while. It might be for hours, might be for days. When we have these massive catastrophes, however they're caused, human caused, nature caused, whatever, all these cool things like apps, cell phones, et cetera, sometimes they go offline. If the internet goes offline, all of a sudden society seems to be freezing, and yet you guys still got to be able to hear about the life-saving opportunities, and you got to be able to get there. So is that built into the plan to kind of at least have a minimal level of, hey, sometimes you're on your own, there's a level of self-responsibility here. You know,
You make a
collect water, food, whatever is in your house, et cetera. Earthquake preparedness kind of stuff.
Correct. You make a great point. We are recommending, and a part of this National Preparedness Month and the proclamation is 72 hours of self-sustainment, where we want people to pack essentially, we'll call it a go bag or a emergency evacuation bag, where you are by yourself for 72 hours. You have enough food and water, you have medicine, you have your critical documents ready to go, because there are times when you might be on your own with no communication. In terms of response and service side, we do have backup generators in place. We are able to communicate with VHF radios as long as repeaters are set up, and we do have ways that we can get out in the community. We have self-sustainment at the stations, and I'm sure Sheriff has the same, but we can still respond and operate. But yeah, the community needs to play a role in that as well. Be aware of that. And before I take any more questions, I will ask if Chief Machida or Captain Gerhardt have anything to add on top of that as well.
The one specific topic as far as self-sustainability?
Just anything in general. Dustin?
If I can give a little historical perspective, most of us were here during the 2003 Cedar Fire. I think you were here, Kyle,
Yep.
weren't you? And Justin, I don't think you were here. Okay, that's the big fire that just swept through a big portion of East County, came and surrounded Santee. We were actually, for a great period of time, on our own during that one. So as you were talking, because we, even though there was some vital communication between all the different commands, somehow we got left out. And I don't even know if you know about that or not, because you guys are still young and, you know, all you wanted to do is fight the fires. But I had a chance to spend that entire day, 24 hours with the chief, and we were on our own. And maybe by phone he was able to check in every once in a while with what was going on at the command post, and I don't even remember where that was, to tell you the truth, someplace in the county. And so the mayor and I came back, and because he was out there also, and we were very concerned. We pulled out our emergency operation plans and all that stuff. We're going, well, this is great if we skin our knee, but it's not really great if we're, you know, burning, flooding, et cetera. So we started working with then, I think it was Chief Foll, and coming up with better plans. And we did come up with better plans. Now, the reason why I mention that is because we hear about today what we're doing, everything from Genesis to backup generators and et cetera. We have that big web out there that everybody gets on. You probably don't know this, but in our Emergency Operations Center, maybe we should do a little field trip through there one day, show how that works. But there's a big map up there that has everything on it, everything that goes in, everybody that's on that. What's the program called? I forgot. It's something web or
Web EOC?
Yeah, web EOC. And it's amazing that you can see in real time pretty much what's happening, where before, you were lucky if you got a report. I mean, we didn't burn anything in Santee, but the bottom line is that it just shows the progression over the years when you stick to making plans and updating plans and finding the newest and greatest technology. Because I remember the sheriff's department, they at Santee, there was a bunch of guys sitting over there just waiting to be deployed. And I know you guys weren't there then, but and there was firefighters there were sheriffs there were San Diego police were there. It's kind of like it was amazing that everybody was coming together. Then all of a sudden they're sitting there just waiting to find out what they're going to do next. And today it's much more sophisticated than that. So I just want to put that little background out there so everybody understands that, we've come a long ways, and as technology improves, we're going to go a long ways, I think. So, come on, nobody else has any more questions?
I do have a question. First of all, we were all subjected over the weekend in the middle of football and all important things that we were watching on our TV, those National Weather Service announcements that nobody could understand. And I just thought, wow, I remember seeing these as a child, 10 years ago? And
Yep.
it was horrific. It was horrific. You couldn't rewind it. You couldn't understand it. I'm looking out the window. I don't know, is Santee part of a reverse 911 system? Do we get those alerts automatically through, I know the city of San Diego has it. And so it just seems like, some of those systems are a little bit better than an MS-DOS thing popping up on your television screen. I don't know if the National Weather Service is related. You have a relationship with those prompts?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know, Chief or Justin, if you have any insight on that.
Yeah, they are horrific, and the concept and why they're still utilized, though, is to try to meet all of the end users in whatever domain that they're engaged in, whether it's on their cell phone, whether it's on their computer or social media, or whether it's watching TV. And so it's low tech. It's almost fail safe from the I shouldn't say that because almost everything will eventually be corrupted, but it's very easy to deploy, and the thought is that we're just going to try and do multiple strategies for communicating with people, because not everybody has a cell phone with them at all times, even though most of us do. And so whether it's listening to the radio or television, whatever, we're trying to just penetrate whatever possible medium that people are using on any given day to make sure the message is conveyed. Now, the National Weather Service is very plugged in with the County of San Diego. And the County of San Diego is really the parent ship that drives most of the messaging. And we are very, very connected to the County of San Diego. And the County of San Diego is extremely connected to what we call our South Ops area, or Region 6. The state of California is the gold standard internationally for mutual aid and for collaborative response to emergencies. They literally took our infrastructure, our structure for how to respond to emergency incidents that was built in the 70s from us, and they incorporated that post 911 and said, everybody in this nation has to do it this way. And it was our methodology from California, those that predated me. And so we try to employ as many of these different resources as possible, again, to meet the end user where they are. But I agree with you, it is horrible, and I don't like it when they mess up my Sunday football.
And
It
are
does
we
upset me.
part of the reverse 911 system in Santee?
That is correct.
If there is a much more detailed emergency, you would definitely get that. This is just kind of a throw it out there and let everybody know something's going on. But you're right, it is terrible.
The interesting part of that was, as soon as it came up on my TV screen, my Alexa also lit up. As you have a notification, you can set up your Alexa to do these things, and then I could understand what she was saying. So it was helpful that you can get those through, I don't even know what you call an Alexa besides an Alexa.
It's a Nest program.
Okay. So, I do get alerts through there when there's some kind of thing, fire or hail. That seems kind of helpful. So I just wondered what the relationship was. And also, you look at your map and you see all those fires in the riverbed. And so you were talking about we got mitigation dollars for that. So there's a plan to do what? Remove brush or?
Yeah, essentially the plan is to remove brush in the area, to thin it out, get rid of the invasive species like some of the palm trees that are in there, and provide defensible space to the homes that are in that area. So it's a multi-year project, $7 million project. Is that right? And yeah, we're awarded that grant, and we're in the first phase of that. to notify the residents and start working forward to that project.
I have a question. And I apologize if it's out there and I'm not aware of it, but does the city of Santee have some sort of a repository that if residents of Santee wanted to be aware of the various alert systems that are out there, that we would be able to trace that? And I'm not suggesting you would have to build the website, but you could provide links to other websites where the alert could be explained. It would seem to me, I mean, as a resident of Santee, that's where I would go first. Some sort of a major link that says, be prepared, emergency alert systems that you have access to, whatever. I think that would be something worthwhile exploring.
I think the closest would be SD Emergency, which is a county, and you can go there and they actually will, you can look up what to put in your bag so that if you have to get out of town. So, but we don't have anything specific here, do we?
Well, we actually do have links through emergency services, through the fire department. And Linda, I think those are great suggestions that we can update as the department is moving through this particular plan update. We do regular updates on our website for citizens. You can do, there's a document repository where you can find all the documents. There's a link repository, but it doesn't get specifically to these kinds of links that you're going to want immediately. So those are certain things that we could work with through this plan that would improve community communication. That's a great idea, and I think we ought to take a look at that. Certainly, anytime there is an issue, as the chief mentioned, there's going to be multimedia efforts to try to reach out to community members. Social media will be updated, as fast as possible. You'll see that. You'll see website updates. But on a regular basis, to be able to just skim and say, oh, yeah, maybe I'd add that so that I'm ready next time, I think that's something we could work with our department on, those kinds of updates, and show improvements in communication to the community.
Well, this is certainly opening my eyes to the alert mechanisms that are currently in place, some of which I knew nothing about. So I appreciate this, and I think that it'd be great to have some place where I could go and see some suggestions and links to other locations.
Sure. We have some of that, but we could certainly beef that up a little bit.
Linda, you bring up a really good point, though. It's kind of like all of us in our job, we spend a career and sometimes we just do the job. We don't really think about it. It's never in the forefront until somebody says, Linda, can you write a standard operating procedure on such and such that you're doing? And all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're going, how do I even do this? I mean, there's no ABC step to it. So this is very similar. We kind of do this job. We know these things are out there, and we don't always think about, well, who else might need to know about them? And so that's why this is such a great venue for talking about these kind of issues, because all of a sudden somebody's going, oh, I got an idea. And because we have so many people from the community on this committee, it really does help us to hone in on a little bit more of what other people are interested in, instead of us just going about our job and doing things and not really thinking about others. And it's not because nobody is saying, oh, we don't want anybody to know. It's just, we're just doing our job, but, that's the way it happens. So, but thanks for that. Appreciate it.
You just described the whole community concept. For you don't know what you don't know, we're up here taking down notes because this is great input for us to recognize, oh, wow, we should be better at that. So thank you.
Remind me to pat you on the back later. Steve?
The QR code here, does that go to the fire department? Does that go to the city, the survey?
It goes to the fire department. We're representing the city, but it will go through to the three of us.
No, there are a lot of great questions on there that relate to some of the questions that were asked, so there's an opportunity to provide more verbose feedback right on that survey.
Yeah, you don't want it to come to us because we don't know what we're doing. It's their job. Yeah.
A lot of the work that I do revolves around overdoses, specifically drugs such as fentanyl and xylazine, which have seen an increased presence, especially within El Cajon. So I guess a qualifying question I wanted to ask would be within these documents that you've showed us today, is there I guess, a portion surrounding, you know, a surge in overdoses for either these drugs or overdose deaths. It doesn't have to be death related, but mainly like, is there something in regards to like a plan of action to an increased amount of overdoses within like a certain area? I don't know if that falls under your jurisdiction, and it kind of feels a little off topic, but in regards to like the overall like health of the community and whatnot, that's the question I have.
Yeah, right now it's not, but you make a great point because it should be. If it's a hazard to the community, we should attempt to address it in our plan.
Okay.
That's something that we could really work with the community and our law enforcement partners with, you know, how to address these things that are impacting the community.
You know, that's a good point, but I'm going to take it one step further because you said, you know, deaths. And they said, well, maybe not deaths. Well, I think we should be capturing all those fentanyl and other overdoses because the reason why we may not have a death is because there may be a naloxone or
Naloxone, yeah.
yeah, naloxone on board, or paramedics get there and save a life. So because we get too hung up, and I hate to say it this way, we get too hung up on, you know, counting the number of deaths, and that's a crisis, okay? But if you count the people that were saved, well, that increases the real fact on what is a crisis. Because, you know, just like traffic collisions, we save a lot more lives. So the death rate for traffic collisions has gone down. Doesn't mean traffic collisions haven't gone down, though.
Right.
Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. That's a moving target all the time. Isn't that right? You guys get there, and the first thing you do is you know, save lives, and then you protect evidence. But half the time, the paramedics are there first anymore, so they're already protecting lives. So that's a really good point. But I just want us to maybe even focus in on those people who don't perish in an overdose or other emergency situation, because those are still emergencies that should be counted. And they probably are in some way, but not in the way they probably should be.
Yeah, I concur. And it's when I said, you know, counting more so like the overdoses, it is in relation to, you know, although there may be fewer overdose deaths, you know, the overdoses themselves and the comorbidity factors that come alongside of it, I agree, can be constituted as an emergency if, again, we look at it the right way. So I'd be open to working with you on that and everything and kind of putting together like the best picture in kind of conjunction. So
That sounds great.
thank you.
Arlene?
Just a couple other comments. I think the team's done a great job making a presentation about some of the major issues that really come top of mind, you know, as you start thinking about, oh, gee whiz, an emergency, what is that going to be? But there are a few others that I know our team is delving into as we update this plan. Number one, for most of you, we have 3 major freeways that go through our community. And, you know, if there's a major accident where those freeways are blocked for a significant period of time, maybe they're on a bridge, maybe who knows what, but there are a lot of things that happen to our community when that occurs. And it creates a lot of consternation in our community, and a lot of people get really upset. If you're on the way to trying to get to a hospital, you're on the way to try to pick your kids up at school, it creates a lot of problems. The other thing that, just a quick reminder, that I'm sure our team is going to be looking at, and that's if there's power outages. Remember the day years ago when power went out in all of San Diego County, right? Your refrigerator doesn't work, your ATM doesn't work, your phone dies because it's not charged, your air conditioning goes down, you can't buy anything at the store because the cash registers don't work, you can't get into some of these buildings because the security systems don't work. I mean, there's a lot that happens, and power outages and where we're going to have specific generators placed and how that happens. Our fire department and our sheriff's department have worked really closely to make sure we're kind of looking at those issues. But as our community changes, those are other things that we need to take a look at. You're going to have a lot of our AFN community or functional needs community that are older. Lantern Crest has grown enormously, right? And what do they do if there's no power? The elevators don't work. The lights don't come on. I mean, there's a lot there. So there's a lot of things that don't maybe come, you know, earthquakes, wildfires are things everybody thinks of right away. But if you sit down and think about it, I'm sure there's a million other things that you could think of that might be issues that need to go in. And I would encourage you to communicate with our team and get them any other, even sounds crazy, at least give them a chance to say, oh yeah, well, we got that covered on page 32. Okay, well, we're good, move on. But that kind of community participation is really important for us, and just want to encourage you to participate. Thank you.
That's great. Ladies, do you have anything to add or questions? Okay.
Dr. Foreman seems to have a question, Mayor.
Oh, Mark.
Just tell me this is too big of a question for now, and we can table it. It's got to do with firefighter mental wellness and also, first responder, law enforcement mental wellness also. In addition to September being Preparedness Month, it's also Suicide Awareness Month. And statistics are pretty well known that there's an elevated risk of suicide amongst first responders. So within a plan like this, as I'm seeing it outlined into those four main categories of mitigation, I'll see if I can remember, planning, response, and recovery. As you were laying that out, I'm seeing places in there where awareness of first responder mental wellness could be inserted all along the way. We're getting ready to go to a fire. We don't have one yet, but we're going to go out and do some mitigation. Why are we doing mitigation? Well, because if we have a fire and we go in there and we find a charred body, now all of a sudden we're dealing with mental wellness issues. And it just spins out of that. My experience with working with first responders around mental wellness is this kind of planning is lacking. So many departments around the nation, or locally here, are drawing attention to it now, awareness to it now, but to have it hit every aspect of the plan where it's embedded, that awareness of it. Not to hound it and say, oh, if you do this job, you're going to go crazy or you're going to kill yourself or something. It's not that. It's those of us that have done the work, those of you that are doing the work, you go running in to help others that can't help themselves in their greatest hour of need, and it takes a toll. And you don't know what it is. That was at 80-some% of those EMS calls. Some of them are really nasty. I'm now talking to the public more than to you guys. Some of those are really nasty. Those are really hard to absorb, and yet you do it again. You go back in service, and you go do it again. And you don't know, well, that one was really interesting. And then you go, oh, didn't think it could get more interesting, and this one just got more intense, more gruesome, more whatever. So, we got the big plans, we got the emergencies, and those will certainly potentially be, those aren't even necessarily the ones that are triggers for PTSD types of material. It's more of the daily run-of-the-mill stuff that you guys are planning for so that when the big one happens, you're mentally fit to go to it, and then your recovery, the mental recovery from what the hell did we just do? Whew, that one was tough. Yeah, it was, wasn't it? And at that point, you might do a critical incident stress debriefing, or you're having critical incident stress management meetings and stuff like that. But planning for it before you need it is different. And that's really, I think, what I'm suggesting here is if there's places in there as you're thinking about it, talking it through with the troops and with the community. And because if you show up at my house, I want you mentally well when you show up, and I also want you mentally well when you leave, no matter what you see when you show up. Hopefully you don't, but does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate that. Generated some really good conversations, good questions. Go ahead and finish that survey at your leisure, and we're going to move on.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Let's see, we're going to say communication from committee and staff. Let's just start down here on this end, and if you have something, just chime in, and the next one will take over.
I'll introduce myself. Hi, everyone. My name is RJ Hullum. I am the prevention specialist for the Institute for Public Strategies, and you'll be seeing me here a lot more just because I absolutely love the city of Santee and Mayor John. I think he does a great job, and yeah, just wanted to say hello.
I paid him to say that. Dan? Steve? Mike?
I was just going to say, I use the Pulse Point app a lot to get notified of when things are happening. It's really, really timely. usually like my staff are calling me about a fire, they see smoke in the riverbed, and it almost instantaneously I'm getting an update, and I can see that how many units are going to the scene, so I can kind of go. So if you're not using the Pulse Point app, I think it's really good. Pulse Point.
Pulse Point.
Where the fire department believes they can speak on, like, how that.
Do you want to say anything about Pulse Point before you leave real quick? As you're coming up, my wife and I looked at that. Well, she discovered it over the weekend, unfortunately. And she talked about all the different medical calls. And so don't we have a system like VETI, Medi, Neti, or something like that? You know what I'm talking about?
I'm not sure
Where you can
what you're referring
pinpoint, you can do a search on where your volume of calls come from.
I'm sure that there's some program out there like that, but we will just pull CAD data for our internal purposes of doing analysis.
Because I think it'd be really cool to see exactly where our highest volume of medical calls are.
Oh, we know.
They know.
But the rest of us want to know too.
They showed in the beginning.
This one was fires.
Well, on the Pulse Point app, you can overload yourself with information, but you
Yeah.
can set the alert so you only get what you really want to hear. So if you put on the medical, you're going to get a beep like every 10 minutes. These poor guys are running around.
Yep, Pulse Point's a
Yeah.
good application, and it was initially designed so you could find the closest AED.
Right.
But now it's become a little bit more, it's more utilized to find out just what's going on in your community. There is a link to it on the fire department's portion of the Santee website. And actually, if you go to the fires page, you could actually see the active incidents and just click on it. And then from there, if you want to download it, it will give you information about how to download. But Pulse, as in your pulse on your wrist, Point. You could probably find it in any app store as well.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we're kind of nerds on this stuff. I got just a bunch of applications. These are all the applications that we use to see what's going on in the county, state, federally. I get earthquake notifications if you want to go and do something like that. But there's a ton of resources out there. And Julie noted today, we will do better at making sure that stuff's more prominent and easily accessible for our community members. But Pulse Point's a great resource.
Well, I also wanted to add something I should have said earlier. I like the way you guys use the social media. You do the Ask a Firefighter. You have little profiles on your staff. And I want to commend you and the sheriffs. You guys do a great job of putting the information out there. You really have to be living under a log to not know what's going on around town. And it always frustrates me. I see people that go, they ask all these silly questions, the keyboard warriors of America out there. And I'm like, you guys do a great job.
Thank you.
And,
we appreciate it. We know we could do better, though, and that's why we're here. So we appreciate your input. We really do.
Thanks. JJ? Aldo? James, you have anything for us?
No, sir. No speakers either.
And no speakers. You ladies want to say anything? You sure? Okay. You can hang around if you want to ask questions later. Let's see. So our next Community-Oriented Policing Committee meeting date and time is October 14th, 2024, right back here at the same time. And the topic will be announced later on via an agenda. So if there's no other comments, let's say meeting adjourned.